Hey, it's your main We're coming back, and today I have a video request from one of my subscribers, Music Man. He's asking me about using maps in role-playing games. Now, I'm going to cover quite a few different sorts of role-playing games in which you could use maps in, but to answer your first question, yes, I use maps. I like maps. This is a good book to show maps from maps like this. Now, this is Abatorel or Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, whatever we're going to call it. That's all of it, the whole thing. So having a worldview over map is a great thing. Having small maps that are up like that are great things too. Now, if you're running your own D&D campaign, you have to hand draw out a map of your world. It doesn't matter how detailed it is. More details are always better, but if you just, okay, here's country, some borders, some forests, some mountains, some roads, some major deals, and you start adding some more stuff, some oceans, maybe another continent over here as well, and some different aspects to the world. Not having a map for your game is a huge because generally when I see someone who doesn't have a map for the game, it looks like they have not often put very much time or effort into the game. They go, oh, well, we have some stuff here and some stuff over here. Then, you know, you can kind of ask them the next week, yeah, where's that stuff? Oh, yeah, it's here, and it's different places. Because there's not a lot of thought put in there, and the nailing down those concrete details, putting together a map for a fantasy game is, in my estimation, a necessity for a campaign. You could have like a really small little isolated area for the map if you don't want to have this huge, vast idea to say you don't really know what is out there, and that's fine. But you know something. You know what's to the horizon, you know what's in the town, and if you're going to have that model, really put your details into the city. Do a city map, do a town map, do a map of where the roads are, where it's going, what is set up, because there has to be some degree of trade going on there. There has to be some, it can't be utter isolation. That just doesn't make sense, because you're not going to have a social level much past Stone Age technology, unless that's what you want to do, which is not within the typical fantasy trope of D&D. Not to say you couldn't or it wouldn't work well. So, for the Forgotten Realms, I buy just about any book I can that has more Forgotten Realms maps in it. I have all the Volo series, small maps, tons of details, intimate details about hills and valleys and rivers and other aspects that have become important into the world, so I can pick up and show someone an actual illustration of what the Red Tooth Ogre Tavern looks like. Here, look in the book, and I could have brought out dozens of books for that. I really like the big maps like this one. It's getting a little worn, so I'm not going to pull the whole thing out now. But for fantasy games, both the macrocosmic and the microcosmic aspects of maps are so helpful. If you can look down, there's Forgotten Realm online, not online, a computer program which I have, is Forgotten Realms Atlas, and some places you can zoom all the way in to the tavern. Maps of taverns and inns are also great things. I have an entire book that is nothing but inside mappings of taverns. Oh wait, that's a lie. I think I have 7 or 8 books that are nothing but inside mappings of taverns for fantasy settings. I used to have just one, and I really liked it, so I just kept buying more fantasy. Well, not just taverns, but for temples, all sorts of things, the actual layout in the map. So, you know, people are like, well, here you go, you know, particularly if something's going to break loose. So, okay, well, let's try to figure that out and, you know, run it that way. A map of a keep your characters are going to have, also very important, great detail the characters can get into and get behind. There is a 3.0 3.0 Dungeons & Dragons book, Strongholds and something or another. It's by Wizards of the Coast, and there's some OGL stuff put out too, but it has pictures and layouts and structures for building strongholds. It's another good book. So remember, your maps are everything from the small to the entire world. I think you should definitely have them. The amount of detail really is going to dictate a lot of tone and theme of your game. And when you show players that, you show them you care, you show them this is a world that they can invest in. If players think they can't really be bothered to invest in your world, they're not that likely to do it. Some of them might be so desperate they will invest, but a lot of them are going to invest a lot more if they see that you have already brought a substantial investment to the game. And really creating a map is a way that you can just show your players, boom, you can go here and adventure and see these things and do this stuff, and they go, and their minds start sparking up immediately because we are visual. We engage visually, and we play in our minds. So our eyes have engaged, our mind is processing, spinning around these wonderful ideas and thoughts, and we want to go there into this imaginary world that you've created as players. Now, let me just change gears a little bit. Now, we've talked about Dungeons & Dragons. Let me talk about real-world games, particularly World of Darkness or Call of Cthulhu. If you're going to run in the real world, and there's tons of great real-world games, getting maps for the real world is way more important than it is in a fantasy game. The fantasy game, you really don't have to have mapped out details of your towns and stuff. If you're running Vampire the Masquerade, you do need an exact map. Know where your subway lines are, know where your docks are, where your roads in and out of town are. All these things are extraordinarily important because Vampire is a game of chess, and you have to have all the power bases covered. As if you go, oh, I don't know who controls the docks. So there's a huge problem there. You need to know where all your vampires are in key positions in that city, who controls what non-vampires are powerful enough to prevent vampiric influence into certain sectors, what the vampires are doing about that. And once you establish those power bases, you really do yourself a huge amount of favor. I like to run Boston by night, typically when I run Vampire, or Phoenix, Arizona. Those are the two cities I like, although I've also run San Francisco. When doing those cities, you can write to the state travel board there and to cities and such, and to get on the line and print things out. And if you go there as a tourist, you can just pick stuff up. I went to Boston, Massachusetts, just pulling stuff left and right, and I'm bringing it back in the game. All right, so we have these museum exhibits. Here where the museums are. Here's how the subway line works. Here's information about the ports. Here's how it's broken down into different districts, like within Boston. Here are the outlying areas, and then I can start putting into position. Okay, this vampire controls this vampire controls this vampire controls this, and then I start looking at it after I make the NPCs, and I could just start drawing all sorts of wonderful stories just out of the positions and the power bases and the lust and the greed that these sort of things inspire. And if someone's trying to control transportation, they might have no reason to at all. Like, you're like, oh, well, this Toreador and Bourgeois would not be enemies. Oh, yes, they would, because one's trying to control the airports while another one's trying to control the harbors. They are both trying to gather all that in. Maybe you can have a plot line where the Bourgeois has acquired the train that runs through Boston. That method, that power base, where those real details when characters are getting into blood hunts and they have to get out of the city or have to try to find someone. You can pull the map out and go, here you go, and it's a real map. It's an unquestionable real map right there with real details, and they do so much work for you. All you have to do is really study it. Spend a few hours working it before you do the planning for the characters, and know all that stuff. It's not hard to learn. It will make the game so much more fluid, and you won't have that deer in the headlights when you have everything laid out for you. And they've done the work for you. You don't have to draw a map at all. You can get tons of great things. Go to Google Earth. You can zoom in on places, and you can have a load of detail right there with the internet. There's so many ways to access that. You can look up, well, what is coming to, you want to run DC by night. What's coming to the Smithsonian? What exhibits are there right now? Okay, yeah, this is what's there right now. So this is what you guys see as you're attending your Elysium in the Smithsonian. Gives you really a lot of great options with the computer to really easily get maps for a modern day. And I just use Vampire as an example, but the same thing for Cthulhu, if you're doing a modern day Cthulhu, or there's also ways to acquire atlases and so forth that are very old atlases from like the 1930s. You can still find that sort of thing, and I don't think even those are particularly pricey. I got a bunch of really old stuff like that. Most of them from family members when they died. Just picking that sort of things up. Let's see. I took a few notes here. Let me make sure I've touched on all my bases. Oh, drawn maps, yeah. The more detail you put into them, the better. I've seen a really good map for like just a fictitious town. in a World of Darkness game, one of guys in my group drew an entire map for a town in the zombie game because it mattered. It was very important. We needed to be able to get from this street to that street to this street to that street. We needed to know where the hospital was, where the gas stations were, where the firearms place was, where people's homes were, where the fast food place was. All these things in the small town, we needed to be able to get around and maneuver ourselves because there were going to be all sorts of pitfalls in different areas. So predicated upon what we wanted to do, it would start triggering off things. And that was really cool. Actually, did a really good job drawing the map. I am not the greatest for drawing things out, but with spending the appropriate amount of time, I can make a map that is certainly quality enough to get the point across. And it doesn't, I remember, you don't have to be a professional artist to draw a map. If it's just squiggles and dots, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. It really just has to come into the mental process. You need to know, at least to some degree, what those squiggles and dots mean. You know, there's your cities, there's your mountain ranges, there's your forest, and so forth. So those are really what is important in terms of making maps. I actually love maps of all kinds, from the smallest, detailing a building, to a town, to a country, to a region, to an entire world. That's something I think that is quintessential in any role-playing game. So hopefully that is of some help to Music Man and anyone else who wants to throw their comments in there. He did say he will be checking for those to get some more additional input and ideas